They say water remembers, it holds echoes of laughter, sorrow, and whispers too faint for the living to hear. Beneath the still surface of Lake Ruen, where ripples look like fragments of a dream, there once was a village, a place where time moved slowly, and bells marked the rhythm of life. The village was called Dremzel. Hidden in the folds of a valley, surrounded by pines and low mist, it was the kind of place that outsiders rarely found, and locals never wanted to leave. Cobblestone paths wound between houses built of pale stone and red roofs. Children played near the river, women baked bread in open courtyards, and at dusk, the church bell called everyone home. For generations. That sound was comfort itself. Then came the government men with their plans and blueprints and words like progress and hydroelectricity. They said the valley had to flood, that the river must be stopped, redirected, tamed. Dremzel lay in the heart of it all, destined to be swallowed by the new lake. At first, the villagers thought it was a rumor. Then surveyors arrived. Then machines. Then the letters ordering evacuation. The priest, Father Marek, begged the officials to spare the church. He said the bell had been blessed 3 centuries ago, and that it was wrong to bury sacred sound beneath water. But his words meant nothing against maps and money. The villagers were told they would be relocated to higher ground. Given new homes, better facilities. Few believed that, but what choice did they have? As the day of flooding drew near, Dremzel grew eerily quiet. Families packed only what they could carry, photographs, letters, a few keepsakes. The rest they left behind, still arranged as if the owners would return by evening. The air smelled of damp soil and sadness. The last night before the valley was to be sealed, Father Marek rang the church bell one final time. Its echo carried across the hills, deep and resonant. People said it sounded like a farewell. And perhaps it was. The next morning, as the sun rose pale behind clouds, the first gush of water began to pour through the new dam's gates. By nightfall, Dremzel was gone. Only the tip of the church spire remained above the surface for a few weeks, and then that too disappeared. Years passed. A lake took the village's name, and people came to fish, to picnic, to swim. To them, it was simply a beautiful body of water. They never thought about what slept beneath it. But the old ones in nearby towns still spoke of strange things, lights seen under the water on moonlit nights, the faint sound of a bell tolling when no wind stirred. At first, everyone dismissed those tales as superstition. Until one summer, a group of divers decided to find out what really lay beneath. They were young, confident, and full of curiosity. They wanted to film the ruins for a documentary, to show the drowned architecture, the forgotten homes. The team of 4 arrived one bright morning, their equipment gleaming in the sunlight. The villagers watched from the shore, uneasy. One of the older men, who had been a boy in Dremzel before the flooding, warned them not to go near the church ruins. "It's not just stones down there," he said quietly. "It's memory. And memory doesn't like to be disturbed." The divers laughed it off. They set up their camp and descended later that afternoon. For the first few minutes, everything seemed fine. The lake water was murky but calm. Through the camera feed, they saw remnants of walls, bits of pottery, what looked like a doorway. It was eerie but fascinating. Then, as they swam deeper, the signal began to distort. The visibility dropped. One diver said he heard something, like distant chimes, but the others didn't respond. Static filled the comms. That was the last anyone heard from them. The rescue teams found their boat the next day, still anchored but empty. The oxygen tanks were there, untouched. Only one thing was recovered, a waterproof camera, lodged between 2 stones at the edge of the old church foundation. when they reviewed the footage, most of it was blurred or dark. But near the end, there was a brief, terrifyingly clear moment. The camera turned toward the church door. It was open. Inside, faint points of light flickered, like candles burning in still water. Then a shadow moved, tall, human-shaped, slow. The video cut to black. Officials called it a malfunction, a trick of light. The families of the divers weren't satisfied, but no one else was willing to go down there. The authorities banned diving in that part of the lake altogether. Months later, a local fisherman claimed he saw the church spire again, just a glint, as if the water had drawn back for an instant. And at that same moment, he swore he heard the sound of a bell. One deep, lonely toll that seemed to come from beneath the surface. He never fished there again. In time, Dremsel became legend. Tourists came to take pictures, whispering about the drowned village. Some said that if you listened carefully at night, you could still hear voices singing hymns from below. Others said the lake was cursed, that anyone who disturbed it vanished, but to the few who still remembered life in Dremsel, the ones who lost homes and families, the stories felt more like a promise than a curse. Because if the lake could still sing, then maybe their past wasn't completely gone. Maybe it was still alive, somewhere in the silent depth. Decades after the flooding, an old woman named Alara moved into a small house near the lake's northern edge. She had been a child when the water took her home, though she barely remembered it. Her parents never spoke of Dremsel, they said it was better to forget. But Alara couldn't. Sometimes, she dreamed of walking on cobblestones, hearing laughter that faded when she turned around. In her dreams, the air always smelled of bread and river water. One evening, during a dry spell, the water level fell lower than anyone had seen in years. Curious villagers went to the shore, and for the first time in decades, the top of the church's bell tower broke the surface again. The sight drew crowds during the day, but at night, the lake was left alone. Only Alara stayed. She sat by the shore with an old lantern, staring at the stones that had once held her childhood. As the moon rose, silver light spilled over the water. The lake was unnaturally still. Then, faintly, she heard it, the bell. One slow, mournful note that carried through the night air. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't imagination. It was real. Her lantern flickered. The water rippled outward from the tower as if something below had stirred. Without knowing why, she stood and whispered, "We remember you." The sound of her voice vanished into the mist. Then the ripples stopped. The bell fell silent. Only the moonlight remained. The next morning, people found her lantern on the shore, still burning. There was no sign of Alara. They searched for days, but she was never found. Some say she walked into the lake willingly. Others say the village called her home. After that night, the water level rose again, covering the bell tower completely. And no one ever heard the bell ring again, but sometimes, when fog drifts low across the valley and the air grows heavy with rain, you can see shapes moving just beneath the surface, like walls, rooftops, the faint outline of a steeple. And if you stand very still, you might catch a whisper, soft, distant, like someone reciting an old prayer. The lake looks calm, but it's not empty. Beneath it lies a memory that refuses to drown, and every drop that touches its surface carries a story, waiting for someone brave enough to listen, because water never forgets, it only waits.